Some of my favorite projects to work on are documentaries. I love that run and gun style of shooting, the flexibility you have in the edit, and the unpredictability that often comes with these types of projects. A while back, I was able to make a documentary for a small local business called Paramount Wood Co. I posted the finished piece on my channel last week, so feel free to check that out if you haven't already. Today, we're gonna do a quick post-production breakdown. Let's jump right into it. All right, so this is the edit. As you can see, I do all my editing in DaVinci Resolve. I used to be a tried and true Premiere editor, but in the last year or so, I made the full switch to Resolve, and I haven't really looked back. I know it's a bit of a hot topic, but I mainly switched for workflow convenience. I didn't really experience a ton of crashes with Premiere, but it was mainly just to eliminate using XMLs when going from the edit to color. When I was doing my own color, it was easy, and when working with colorists, a lot of them use Resolve. So instead of sending out an XML, using a DaVinci Resolve project or .drp file was way easier to just send over instead of dealing with the file transfer XML translation thing. So back to the edit. Normally what I like to do first is kind of throw everything into a string out timeline. For this project, I pretty much just did that for the interview here. I threw the entire thing into one timeline and just went through and started gathering little bits and pieces, little blurbs of answers that I liked. And normally when I find something that I like to cut it out and then put it onto track 2 or even track 3 if it's something that I really think is an important piece of the interview. That just makes it way easier when I start my rough cut to copy and paste the top 2 tracks and then put that into a new timeline. Another important note is that I do like to make a new timeline for every one of my cuts. So every time I'm starting a string out or picking selects or a rough cut, a fine cut, a picture lock, I'm making a new timeline, mainly because one, it's just easy to have kind of a history of every one of your cuts. And then also sometimes you want to undo things, but not other things. And it's much easier to just go back to a specific solid starting point and pick things from there to put into your latest edit. It's just always worked for me. It's something I've been doing for years, so it's kind of just ingrained in me. It was definitely hard to do and hard to remember to do at first, but yeah, just having that as a backup is always super helpful. So a little bit of background on the project itself. This piece is about Colin Thompson, who is the owner of a woodworking company based in Bucks County, Pennsylvania called Paramount Wood Co. So before starting his business, Colin was a professional race car driver, and he competed all around the globe for teams like Volkswagen, Porsche, McLaren. And now that he has this new path and he kind of transitioned careers, we really wanted to tell that story of how he found his passion in woodworking. The cinematographer on this project was Karsten Schlag. We both agreed that we wanted to be as minimal as possible, and I think we only brought one light for this entire project. I often find when working in this run and gun documentary style, you want to try and be as out of the way as possible, especially for small businesses. It's great when you can have full control of your setting, but not being intrusive as a filmmaker, I think, especially in a doc setting, is really important, in my opinion. Yeah, so this is our Milano board for the entire project, and I'm actually gonna just jump right into the storyboard because the storyboard was, without a doubt, the most helpful thing for me when starting the edit. Like I said, in a documentary, it's fun oftentimes to play with your story and kind of have that flexibility in post, but I definitely don't think you should go into a project without having a plan. It allowed me to get on the same page with my cinematographer, the client, and everybody just be ready to go on day one and know exactly what we're shooting. But yeah, the general idea of these first 2 sections was to focus on the racing. So Colin's family has an amazing race car collection and warehouse where they have tons of race cars, tons of memorabilia and trophies from Colin's past as a professional race car driver. And we were super lucky to get in here and film. We actually got to take one of the Porsches from the warehouse and use that as Colin's car driving from the warehouse to this next location, which was a wood wholesaler. Pretty much anytime Colin starts a new project, this is the place he goes to get wood from. It's all sustainably sourced from trees that were reclaimed after falling in the woods. And we really wanted to show the wood in its rawest form, all the way to it being milled and now actual lumber that he chooses for each one of his projects meticulously. So during this portion, he's talking about his roots as a woodworker and how at a very young age he started with his grandfather, and how his family is extremely artistic, but for him it never connected to painting or drawing. It was very much through working with his hands. So seeing that and seeing the wood and the roots of his past was really the focus for this portion. And then the last couple portions here, we see him in his wood shop doing the actual work. So we're seeing his hands, we're seeing his focus, we're seeing the end products as well. All the while he talks about his philosophy in woodworking. Finally, we have this really peaceful ending where everything kind of comes full circle, and we see Colin in this hero frame, and we hear him talking about being fulfilled and finding balance in this new path. But yeah, the edit ended up being really similar to the storyboard that I came up with in pre-pro. So after I had my interview string, I started looking for music. Shout out to MusicBed. I use them for all my song music needs. But yeah, so interview string, music, and then it was time to throw in a bunch of B-roll. So yeah, this ended up being the finished edit. I think when it comes to pacing and shot selection for B-roll stuff, you know, that takes time to develop as an editor. I think you get an eye for it as you continually practice and continue doing it. It's something I'm still figuring out myself. But I ended up being really happy with how everything was feeling at this point. Now for arguably the most important part of the edit, sound. Everybody talks about it, but sound is absolutely key to making your projects come to life. I feel like as a viewer, I'd almost rather have subpar visuals with amazing sound over really, really amazing visuals and no sound or subpar sound. I think building out your world helps draw in your viewers exponentially. That being said, one thing that we did not do on this project was record sound. Aside from the interview, everything we recorded was MLS. So looking back is something I definitely wish we did do. I think in the moment we both just overlooked it. This meant that I had to work from the ground up. Most of the time I like recording scratch audio. That way you at least have a base to build up and enhance your sound design from the start. So to build out that sound environment, I did a mix of things. Normally I use Epidemic Sound for all my sound effects. Shout out Epidemic Sound. I also have an entire folder and library that I've just collected over the years of sound effects. And then for anything that I can't easily find in either of those places, I just record on my own using this guy. There are definitely better ways to do it, but just throwing this H4n zoom on stereo and then having somebody record me doing footsteps, clothing rustle, whatever it is, makes things super easy for my purposes. I also recently started recording all of my own whooshes. So essentially what you do is you just drop your levels way, way down to like 5 or even below that. And you have to get the right angle, but you get really close to the top of the mic and you just essentially blow into it. And it sounds a bit weird, but you can get some really, really authentic sounding whooshes. And it's great to be able to control the speed, the length, especially in post. You can change the pitch. Yeah, I found that my whooshes have gotten exponentially better when recording them myself. Let me show you a couple whooshes here. This looks like it is most likely whooshes. Here we go. Yeah. It was super easy. It was super quick. Highly recommend trying that out. I also wanted to show you a couple examples of just the power of sound itself. So I'm gonna pull up a couple sequences here. Specifically, right after our driving scene, Colin starts talking about woodworking itself. So we have transitioned from leaving the world of racing to his new path, which is woodworking, and talking about his roots in woodworking. So I'm gonna play this sequence with just his interview and the soundtrack. So let's watch that now.
In woodwork. It was just a passion of mine that anytime I wasn't racing, I would do it just as my creative outlet. I came from a family that had a little bit of an artistic background. Everybody liked to paint. I had no talent with any of that. But what made sense to me was working with my hands, working with metal, working with wood. The organic interest was there.
Cool. So as you can see, looked great. Sound was cool, but when you take out the interview and the sound and you play that back with just the sound effects that I built out, it sounds so different. So let's take a look at that. Cool. Yeah. So none of that was real. That was all recorded or epidemic sound or a whoosh that I made. And when you put them together, I'm going to play it back one more time and you'll be able to hear the full effect that adding such a built out sound design gives you.
It was just a passion of mine that anytime I wasn't racing, I would do it just as my creative outlet. I came from a family that had a little bit of an artistic background. Everybody liked to paint. I had no talent with any of that. But what made sense to me was working with my hands, working with metal, working with wood. The organic interest was there. It was blaringly obvious to me that I should just make a business around this. So otherwise I might miss an opportunity to do something.
Another fun thing that I like to do is panning my audio. So, if there are certain things in your frame, you can kind of play around with where your viewers are hearing the sound come from, especially if they're wearing headphones. If you're hearing this right now, you'll hear that this kind of bulldozer is only coming on the left side. I also did that with kind of this driving sequence. When the car whizzes by, it comes from sort of the middle and then off to the left. I'll play that for you as well. So yeah, playing with those kind of panning tools and really just making your viewer feel like they are there and they're experiencing this thing draws them in and makes them have a much better experience watching your video. Yeah, so the other sequence that I really liked was when he picks up his helmet in the race car shop.
I was obsessed with. Today, you're seeing a situation where it's just who can spend the most money. Getting away from the real life Fast and Furious kind of experience. You get something that isn't authentic.
So that was clothing rustle. That was, one second. Here it is. This is my ice hockey helmet. This is what we used to record the helmet Foley. So, like, the clothing rustle, the cage closing, that is the visor of his race car helmet closing. And then the rest of it is just like, it looks so stupid and weird, but like it sounds amazing. So moral of the story, use storyboards to aid in your edit, use separate timelines to track your cuts, and please consider sound designing. It makes an entire world of difference. That's all I've got for today. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. I've been having a ton of fun with this channel and I'm really excited to keep watching it grow. I hope that some of this was helpful, maybe some of it not, but either way, I'll see you next time. Peace.
With you.